Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own. Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they are released. Today's film we're talking about is the latest MCU entry, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is directed by James Gunn and stars Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, and Vin Diesel. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you'll know my overall thoughts on the MCU in this last while. Everything since No Way Home, and really since Endgame, has been on a bit of a downward spiral. Maybe not as dramatic as that, but certainly hasn't been too much that's wowed us, apart from things like No Way Home. I would maybe put Shang-Chi in that category as well, which was more of an underrated surprise rather than something that was really standout and fantastic. It was great for what it was. But really, No Way Home is the only thing since Endgame that is truly... It's been the only thing I've really loved, I think, from the MCU since. And I'll admit, not that a lot of these projects I didn't have hype for. A lot of things like Doctor Strange and, and Thor Love and Thunder, and a lot of these movies, well, I maybe enjoyed them more than some people, maybe lesser in some cases. But to be honest with you, there was only really two. As soon as Endgame rolled, there was only two films, really, that as time went on, I was really holding out hope for. And that makes it sound very dramatic. And of course, it's not in a way of like, these will definitely be good. I think it was more hope. It was hope and a prayer. And the two were Spider-Man No Way Home. I know Far From Home was after Endgame, but really, the finale of that trilogy, I had hoped for so much, and got it in the finale of the Spider-Man MCU Sony trilogy, whatever you call it, in No Way Home. And the other one was Guardians, because say what you want about their involvement in Endgame and everything, and I really enjoyed their involvement in Endgame and enjoyed their role that they played. I do have to say that when it came to something like Thor Love and Thunder and their addition for what it was and for the lack of it in reality, I mean, they were there for like the opening scene. Really, I had a lot of hope for Guardians 3 because it was the one. And let's talk about Guardians as a whole, and the two movies up to this point, disregarding a lot of their other involvement in other projects, as I say, Thor Love and Thunder, in Endgame and Infinity War, and whatever other capacities they popped up in. For their movies themselves, if you've been on the channel for a while and you've seen my 5 of the best, you'll know my love and how much I feel that the first Guardians movie encapsulates everything great about that era of the MCU. Forget Endgame, forget Infinity War, forget Civil War or Ragnarok or any of those. Guardians 1 is what I would show someone if they didn't want to watch 27 movies or whatever it is up to the double bill finale there of Infinity War and Endgame, and they wanted just an MCU film to see. I might like it, I might not. Guardians of the Galaxy, I think, is the perfect exemplification of that. Why the MCU at that time was lightning in a bottle, and why James Gunn was a great director, and that's something we'll get on to soon. And even with Volume 2, because I know Volume 2 a lot of people seem to be quite disappointed by, but I actually really loved as well. And while I didn't love it as much as the first film, which, I mean, to varying levels, it would probably be the same case for a lot of people. But I found that while the first one was more of a fun adventure, sci-fi, comedy, everything rolled into one, I found the second film in Volume 2 quite emotional, and it went more of the emotion and a lot more of character development for certain characters, but not all. And I think it just depends on your preference for that. And while I still, as I say, I do prefer the first film, the second film itself was great. So coming into Guardians 3, I was hoping for a brilliant finale. If it is going to be a trilogy, I was hoping it was going to be a great end and a worthy end to these characters that I've grown to love. No matter what's going on with the MCU as a whole, whether it's great, whether it's not so great, this was always something that I had hoped for, and probably like yourselves, if you've been following this and these set of characters, you would want them to have a worthy end, and an end that's worthy of each of the characters. And so did it get that? Was Guardians 3 the great finale that it was? And was it a gem in the rough, a diamond in the rough of what has been the MCU of late in the last kind of 2 years? Has it been a rare, bright spark? Guardians 3, as a whole, is a beautiful finale to the trilogy. It is really emotional. I talked there a little bit about the emotion that's shown in Volume 2. That's nothing in comparison to Guardians 3. This movie is a very emotional time. There is so many. It's littered with emotional moments for all of the characters. Every character I said there about, do they get their worthy send-offs? I don't think there's any character that feels underutilized, forgotten about, an afterthought. In reality, everybody gets a great time. They get a great story through this movie and also a finale to their story as a whole from the last two movies. And whatever goes on in the future for the Guardians or for the lack of, this was a wonderful ending. Wonderful ending. It's one of my favourite endings to a movie in recent years. And it's just so... Well, actually, you know, I will wax lyrical because I really did enjoy Guardians 3, and I'll get on to how much I loved it. But what I will say, and it's starting off with a negative, I know, but I do want to start off with this because it would be remiss of me not to mention this. I have to say, the first 30 to 40 minutes of this film are not brilliant. They're okay, but there was a part of me, about half an hour in, where I'm going, I'm getting the same kind of feeling. I'm getting the feeling that we're in a Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, and while I didn't hate both of those films, I just think that they were a waste of potential, and I'm thinking, God, please don't be the same case for this. But after the early start, and after the lack of anything that was really blowing me away, or really connecting me again, or reconnecting me with these characters in the first 30 to 40 minutes. After that, and the early period of the movie is over, and once it really gets into its stride, it doesn't stop. It has great action. It has great character moments. It has great dialogue. There's some funny moments. And I keep using that word, but the emotion in this film really hits home. And I found that. I think there will be a lot of people in a lot of tears in this movie. And they're warranted. It's not like it's, you know, it's just for talk's sake. I mean, the character development for some of the characters that are a bit more underutilized and a bit less drawn out and have been explored in the previous entries. Characters like, as I'm sure you've probably seen from the trailers, and if anybody you've talked to that's seen the movie has said, Rocket Raccoon gets probably the most character in this film. And it really not only builds on the character as a whole, and when you go back, I would imagine on rewatches of the whole Guardians of the Galaxy storyline through the other films and their own trilogy, it really builds on his character. Characters like Nebula, Gamora, even Drax, even Dave Bautista gets to show a lot of, you know, that he isn't just the muscle, he isn't just the... I find a lot to love in this, and I did love... it's one of my favourite endings in the MCU. And I don't say that lightly, but we've had a few of those. I thought something like the end of No Way Home, for example, in recent times, after Endgame, because, you know, it's hard not to have a... You know, it's clearly the end of a chapter when Endgame finished. And then the next chapter of the MCU started. And let's be real. The MCU has not been so good in recent times. Some movies have been fine. I haven't... If you've been following the channel, you'll know I haven't hated really any of the movies. There hasn't been any that I found offensive or really, really bad. But what I have done, and what I would imagine a lot of you would share, is it's been disappointing. It feels like, you know, you're on such a high from Endgame and you would build on it, but in reality... While the building blocks are there, I don't think there's anybody that's really grasped that opportunity, aside from No Way Home. And now I would put Guardians Volume 3 in that category. And I'm really happy to say that, because I'll be honest, I really didn't have too much hope coming into this, because of the last 5 to 6 movies that I've seen, you know, and really everything but bar No Way Home and Shang-Chi really are the only two that have given me the hope. But that was a while ago. That was a full year ago for both of those films. So to have Guardians end on a beautiful way, and I think, actually, I mean, I definitely feel this now. This is the strongest trilogy in the MCU by a good way. Because I know Thor has 4 movies, but yeah, I mean, the only one that ever scratches the surface of any Guardians movie is Ragnarok. The Captain America movies, I mean, Winter Soldier and Civil War are good, but the first one, yeah. Iron Man, I just don't think so. I mean, Ant-Man, you must be joking. There really isn't any that has the quality, and I think the real love of the characters. And I mentioned earlier about James Gunn and his directing, and of course there was the possibility of not only the Guardians finishing and not getting their final outing, but also him not returning. He was fired and then he came back, and I'm so glad he did. And I know he has this whole new project with DC, and he's helming the whole reset of their universe. And I have to say, while I didn't love the Suicide Squad, and I mean the one last year with Idris Elba and John Cena, and that one, which not that I didn't hate it either. I thought it was good fun for what it was. I don't think it didn't really scratch the surface of what Guardians was able to achieve, but I could see the intent there. And it's clear that James Gunn is great with these ensemble comedy heroes. And I think to have him at the helm of that new DC project is a really smart move from them. But for him to kind of sign off from Marvel as a whole, to sign off in this way, to have started with Guardians and to have ended with Guardians, and to have a great trilogy, and the best trilogy in the MCU, and maybe the best Marvel trilogy. Yeah, could be. Yeah. Because even the Spider-Man trilogy, because it's hard to say that I enjoy Homecoming and Far From Home probably more than a lot of people do. And a lot of people probably say only No Way Home is the truly great film of the 3. And I mean, the argument is certainly there, but to have them, that still, I think Guardians is the most consistent of the 3. The first one has, as I say, a lot of the action, a lot of the story, a lot of the comedy. The second one has, again, a lot of the comedy and a lot of the story, but it also enables that real emotional factor, and you realise how much you start to care for these characters. And then the third one builds on both of those things. Is it my favourite of the 3? It's not. It still isn't. I still think the first Guardians is still the best MCU movie that isn't an ensemble. Because you've got Thor Ragnarok, which is an ensemble. Civil War, the same. Infinity War, of course, is the same. Endgame. No Way Home, I would also class as that because of it. Kind of, well, I mean, both are really good. And it's nice to see that the MCU can still achieve this. And it did need this. Because I think if this film had been a stinker, if this had been awful, or not so good, or disappointing again, similar to the other ones, I think the MCU would have... Oh. I mean, it's already in kind of a downward spiral, as I mentioned earlier. So it was really good to have this as a positive. And a really big positive. And it's something that I will always look back on it. And it maybe is one of my favourite... it definitely is. It's definitely one of my favourite superhero trilogies. Now, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy is a great one. And everybody gets their character moments. As I say, people like Chris Pratt, who, of course, as Star-Lord didn't get the best outing. Just kind of character moments when it comes to Infinity War. But everybody shines in this. As I say, some of the lesser characters, even someone like Mantis and Palm Clementine, or Clementif, is that how you say her name? Well, hopefully I'm not butchered that. Even her, some of the quote-unquote lesser of the Guardians. But really, this is Rocket Raccoon. This is Bradley Cooper. For him as a voice actor, because he's really showed his chops in the last 10 to 15 years. Even when he kind of started with The Hangover, it was shown that he was a good comedy actor and he had good comedy chops. But he's really surprised me at how much he's achieved, and that's not a dig in any way. I just think he's shown so much conveyance of emotion in films when I thought he was really typecast as a comedy actor. You know, in early films, even in something like, probably the earliest thing I can remember him in is something like Yes Man with Jim Carrey, which was before The Hangover. And, you know, even in that, I thought, okay, well, he's just going to be a comedy actor, he's pretty good in that. And even after The Hangover, as great as it is, I was like, well, he's still going to be the comedy guy. But for him to have such range and go on to things like American Sniper and The Star Is Born and things like that, and even in Guardians, because yes, he brings a lot of, and he's so over the top with the delivery of some of the lines with Rocket, but he does it so well, and it hits so. There's a real. It's amazing to say that there's such a connection to a talking raccoon and a tree. You know, if you're feeling the emotion watching the story about a raccoon and a tree, I think as a movie director, as a script writer, as, you know, a comic book writer, of course these are based on the stories, you've definitely done something right in conveyance of the character traits, the charisma, the chemistry, to convey that so well to the audience and to connect to them and so well when you shouldn't connect as well to the Guardians, and that certainly started in the first film. You know, to have this band of heroes where, you know, one's green, one's a muscle guy who says everything literally, one's a robot, one's a raccoon, one's a tree, and like that's going to be your core characters that you really care about, and as I say, you feel so much emotion about, especially in this film. Bravo to everyone involved with the Guardians trilogy, and to have it be that diamond in the rough of recent years, and one of the diamonds in the rough. I'm just really happy. I'm really happy to see that the Guardians has went out on a high, and a really good high. And as I say, the ending of this film is, yes, emotional, but is beautiful. It's beautiful, and something, it would be remiss of me not to mention this as the Guardians trilogy as a whole, but the music. And I don't mean the score, I mean the actual choices of music throughout all of these three films, and the way they have revived so many and brought so many great tunes of maybe the 70s and the 80s to a younger generation, and revitalised some of these songs. Things like Come and Get Your Love, things like Mr. Blue Sky, you know, are some of the particular ones, and there certainly will be a few from this film, but that's for you to find out when you go and see it yourself. Anyway, let's get to rating time. As you can imagine, it's going to be a pretty good one. As you can see, IMDb, the early feeling and the early vibe from the general audience is similar to myself, a positive one. It's been positive, and I think everybody is, well, it seems to be that a lot of people are, a bit like myself, relieved that this has went out on a high and has been very strong. For myself, I mean, this is definitely a solid 9 out of 10, and I am so glad to be saying that, because it was one that I was losing hope in. With every Marvel disappointment of the last wee while, I just think that Guardians was always one. Please do that right. Please do that right. And they did. And I would definitely implore you to go see this yourself. If you've been following the MCU as a whole, or even just the Guardians' first two films, and you're really wanting to see the third one, I don't think you'll be disappointed like myself. I think you'll be in a similar boat. Anyway, that's been my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm happy. I'm happy for this to have been the case. I'm happy that we got the ending that we wanted. I love that in a good trilogy where there isn't a dud one. There isn't one, and of course that's my opinion. I know a lot of people don't really like, well, I know there's certainly a portion of the audience that aren't as fussed on the second film, but I'm really happy that we've got a great trilogy that I could go back and revisit, and it doesn't involve me watching 453 million movies to get the entire story. You've got 3 films, and they're 3 good films. Anyway, that's been my review. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this, and if you enjoyed it, leave a like, let me know. Subscribe and hit the bell to stick around for more reviews like this. There's a lot more coming soon. And if you do, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.